So it seems the Kawhi Leonard situation that has confused the hell out of the Spurs and the entire NBA world for about a year now or so has reached its boiling point, as there are now rumors that Kawhi is requesting a trade away from San Antonio. And of course, the dude is immensely talented, but I think there's some risk involved, depending on the team that's interested. And for the Boston Celtics, who have been connected to rumors already with Kawhi, I do think there is some risk here. And we'll dive into it. But I do think the heart of a trade would probably start with Jaylen Brown, and then Terry Rozier, who elevated himself into something this postseason, whether that would be an average point guard, an above average one, or whatever. I do think those two are at least decently enticing for San Antonio. Of course, the main attraction being Jaylen Brown, a wing player who's athletic, his jump shot is improving, and the defense seems like it could be something really good. You would have to add more players and potentially even a third team for the sake of making the salaries work. But if you were really determined, you could get Kawhi Leonard on the Celtics. And before we get into why this could frighten the Celtics, we're going to get into the good stuff first. This was the best defensive team in the league this season, and you put Kawhi Leonard into that situation, and you could be looking at maybe the best defensive team of all time. I mean, you might have to make adjustments depending on era and pace and what have you, but still, the team that was already number one in the league, adding the guy who could be the best defensive player of all time, that's something, you know? And with Brad Stevens' system, which is dependent on communication and rotations and switching when you're supposed to switch and being physical on the perimeter and making the opposing team uncomfortable at all times. I mean, that team managed to be great without an elite perimeter defender, and you put Kawhi Leonard there, and, well, I don't want to repeat myself, but you could have something truly special on your hands. But the other thing with the defense is LeBron scorched the Celtics in the conference finals. He had, 35 points, I believe it was, in the deciding Game 7, and outside of his Game 1, he was fantastic all the way through, right? And who is the best LeBron defender in the NBA? Oh yeah, it's Kawhi Leonard. So not only could you make yourselves just elite and then some against the entire NBA, you also have the one guy who could actually bother the best player in the league, which is a necessity, because if you're just going to allow him to go off for 35 to 45 points every game, and I mean, we don't know what team he's about to be on. He very well could have a second and maybe even a third star player next to him. And if you've got Kawhi Leonard to deal with that, then that's huge if you're Boston. The other thing we got to talk about is the Celtics offense, which is also based around communication, forcing switches, and getting mismatches and making extra passes and all that good stuff. I think Kawhi Leonard could fit into that pretty well. Sure, he's a guy who likes to have the ball in his hands, and he'll have his contested shots and all that, and we'll address that in a moment, but I feel like Brad Stevens would have Kawhi moving off the ball. He would put him in situations where he could be successful. It wouldn't just be basic isolations at the top of the key or whatever. It would be some dynamic stuff, right? On top of some of the more simple offense that Kawhi likes to run sometimes. That could be special as well. And I think you just put all that together, this team and the way they move the ball in Brad Stevens' system with Leonard, it could be great. But I also want to talk about Kyrie Irving, because one thing to be a great offense and to have a real chance in the postseason is you need guys who can hit tough shots. You need guys who can bail you out of a possession that's going nowhere, hit a tough shot with 6 or 7 seconds left in the shot clock. And if you had two of those guys, Kyrie and Kawhi Leonard, then there could be times when you would be nearly unstoppable. Because even if you're facing a good defensive team, but you're able to just get something out of nothing, basically. And I think Kawhi Leonard has gotten to the point where we can expect that from him. Then you just might be a cheat code, right? Where you have this all-time defense, and then you can get whatever you want on offense. So, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why they should do this, of course. However, I do think we can begin to address the potential why nots for the Celtics team. The big thing is we saw it in the Philadelphia series, the way they pushed the Cavaliers to 7 games. This Celtics team, from a chemistry standpoint right now, is about as good as you can get on the floor and off the floor. And there was a lot of controversy surrounding Kawhi this season, man. I mean, a lot. His silence with the Spurs organization, his moodiness, the impression that he made that he wants to be his own guy and perhaps even be bigger than the team, which is something we wouldn't say about him a few years ago. There's rumors about one of his family members getting in his ear and maybe hyping up his ego too much, and you fear that the Celtics, they trade quite a few things to get the guy, they get him in there, and then suddenly it just throws a monkey wrench into a situation that beforehand was going really well. Now, these are just fears. For all I know, you have him in a Celtics jersey in Brad Stevens' system, and he's able to fit in effectively. He is not a disruption. He's not this moody guy who doesn't really want to talk to anyone, and his injury is non-existent. If that's the case, well then beautiful. You have 2 top 10 players and a great team around those two. We also need to talk about Al Horford, though, specifically his contract, because he's making nearly $30 million, and he may be forced to take a pay cut once his option has concluded after 2020, because if he doesn't, this team could be insanely expensive if they acquired Kawhi, because you got to remember, Gordon Hayward is still on a max deal with this team, and then if Horford wanted another big contract on top of the money that they're probably going to give Kyrie Irving after next season, I mean, if you had Kawhi Leonard and then those 3 guys on big deals, then you could be in luxury tax hell, and then you'll have to get into the repeater tax, and the team could just cost way too much damn money to keep together. Now, luckily for them, I do think Horford's the kind of guy who would take less money if he felt it was necessary or if he felt it was the right thing to do or whatever. But at the same time, I'm not going to put the pressure on him to do that. I mean, if you can make more money in the NBA somewhere, I'm not going to fault you for doing it. But it's still an interesting thing, and if Horford was gone, I mean, look, the dude's a valuable player for them. He just is. So, there's reasons to do it for the Celtics. You could get a top 10 player. That's about all the case you need. But there's some real negatives there too. You know, is the injury still a thing? Is this new Kawhi Leonard just not an easy guy to deal with? Who knows?